Hello, I'm Paula Bolton, co-founder of Lesbian Labour. Welcome to our Proud Lesbian series. During Pride Month, I'll be interviewing a wide range of lesbians to gather lesbian perspectives and to hear about lesbian lives in 2022. And my 21st and final interviewee for this part of the series is Liz, who's a retired logistics manager from my own hometown of Corby. Hello, Liz. Thanks for agreeing to do this.
No problem.
Well, thanks for letting me twist your arm.
Well, like I said to you, prepared to be bored stellarly.
Okay.
The word.
I'll sit back then. So I'm going to ask you to start where everyone else has. Can you talk to me about your life as a lesbian, how you realised, what happened? Was there any homophobia, stuff at school, that sort of a line to begin with?
Well, I'm not one of these people who was growing up wondering if there was something different about me. I never had that. I never really thought about it until school. And then it was the weird connection between me and a certain individual teacher who just, I don't know, there was something about her that it wasn't attraction, because I didn't particularly like the individual, but it made me wonder what it was I was feeling and thinking. So, nothing really came of that, obviously, and I left school not really thinking much about that side of my life. But then when I started work, I met someone quite a bit older than me, and I started to think, this is odd. Why is she on my mind all the time? And it kind of became something. And as a result of that, I ended up telling my family, telling my parents that obviously this penny just dropped here. So I was a good age. I was maybe 18, 19, before I actually looked myself in the mirror, as I often say to my nephew and other members of my family who have since come out. The point where you look in the mirror and say, this is me. And so now I have to build my life around this. And so I was about 19 when that happened. I told my mother, and she's like, well, it's not what I would have chosen for you, but you just need to be happy in your life. And the rest of my family kind of rolled in behind that. And there was no, What was interesting though was my parents just never talked about it. Anybody I brought home, anybody who was a friend or a special friend, they were fine with them and all the rest of it, but it was just never a topic for discussion. So, I talked to my brothers and sisters about it, but my parents just didn't. They accepted it, but they didn't want to be involved in it, if you know what I mean, beyond, oh, this is who you brought home for Christmas this year, okay. That kind of thing. So, like I said, kind of boring really, because there was no drama, but it was a little odd that my parents just never mentioned it. Mm. So,
Can I ask you, when you looked yourself in the mirror and said, okay, this is who I am, did you have a word for it at that stage?
I really hate the lesbian word, but I guess that's what it was.
Yeah.
It's one of those words that I just, it's a label. And I don't know about labels. I've never really gone around saying, I'm a lesbian. I quite, I love the little gay word that lets you say, or when I made friends with people in Northampton, we used the word Hilda. I'm sure you've heard this story from Hazel. And people say, Hilda, what's a Hilda? Well, if you're walking around Sainsbury's and you say lesbian alert, little old ladies keel over. But if you're walking around Sainsbury's and you say Hilda alert, nobody knows what you mean except for you. And so not that I necessarily refer to myself as a Hilda, but, when people ask me, I say that I'm gay. I don't say that I'm a lesbian. I don't, have never used that word particularly. So
and it is interesting because that is one of the things, the whole what we call ourselves at any point and whether that's changing over time. But was that common in the group that you were around? Did you generally all say, oh, we're gay?
Yes.
Other than that we're lesbians? And do
Yeah.
you know, what was it that people didn't like about the word?
Do you know, I wish I could tell you that, Paula. I don't really know. It was just something that, you know, and it's funny because when we went to gay pride marches in the mid to late 70s, which we did every year, you know, we walked under the banners that said lesbians, but it just was not a way in which we referred to ourselves. And I've never really questioned that, and I don't think I can answer for the others.
Yeah, because there was a Channel 4 documentary recently, Where Have All the Lesbians Gone? And everyone on that was asked it. And I mean, there was some was because that's what they'd been, you know, that they were the insulting, it had been used as an insult for them when they were at school or whatever. Oh, you're a lesbian, or, you know, like said with derision. Some of the younger women definitely said it was because if you put lesbian into your search engine, all you get is porn. And it's kind of like a word that's been turned into something horrible. But that isn't what I have heard from other women. There's just literally something about the word itself, you know. So yeah, there you were, gay, accepting that you're gay. Who did you meet? Who else did you meet that was gay? Did you know other gay people?
I did not until I got into the women's football team. And the relationship that I got into with this older woman that I eventually realized what was going on, that kind of fizzled because it was complicated. And I mean, massively complicated, married, children, all of that.
Right.
So it was really going nowhere for me. Even although there was this weird situation where her husband was fine with it and he would have let it continue, I'm just like, you know, where does that leave me? I'm not going down this road. So it kind of fizzled out. And we started to play football in Corby for Corby ladies. Hazel, myself. Did you know Isabel Houston? Did you know her? I don't think she went to our school. I think we met her at football. Anyway, we played football. And then that team fizzled out. And we got pointed in the direction of a team in Northampton, by which time we were driving. I had a car, so me and Hazel used to get in the car and go across to Northampton. And it was quite funny because the old gaydar goes off. You don't know you've got gaydar till you get it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
You know, I'm looking around the room and there's probably 2 girls in the team who weren't, but no one else was admitting anything. You know, it was all very under the hat.
Right.
We'd probably been going and playing. We used to train on a Friday night and play on a Sunday. So Hazel and I have probably been going there for several months, training on a Friday night. We would get back in our car and go back to Corby, and the others would all sort of go off. And one particular week, somebody said, "Oh, we're going for a drink at the, you know, so and so. Do you want the Cock Hotel?" It was in Kingsthorpe, but it wasn't the gay pub. That was just where they went for a drink. So we said, "Well, okay." And I said, "Well, I have to find a phone box because I have to let my mother know I'm coming home late." Because, you know, none of my family were told be on time, whatever. But if my mother was used to me coming in at 9 o'clock and I didn't, that was a drama.
Yes.
So, of course, I called and said, "Hey, I'll be late. We're good." And off we all went for a drink. Still no mention of the, you know, we're the little different crowd here. Just we're all having a drink. So the next week after that, will your mum let you come out with us tonight? Was the question. And I said, "Well, I kind of warned her that I might be late, so I don't have to get permission tonight. I'm just good." And they said, "Well, there's a pub in Northampton that we go to, and it's called the Princess Royal." And me and Hazel are like, "Okay." And there's something different about that pub. And we're all sitting there. Nobody's really saying anything, but we all know what the conversation is. And we're like, "Okay, let's go." So we went, and it was the only gay pub in Northampton at that time. So that was really where it all kicked off from. That's when I started to meet other people like myself and build friendships. And those friendships are strong today. you will have, when you went to Hazel and Sarah's wedding, will have met most of those people.
Yeah.
We go back that 40 odd years.
Mm.
You know, we don't go back as far as you and me and Hazel go, but the rest of us go back that 40 odd years to when we played football together. We found all the gay haunts together. We went to gay pride together, so on and so forth. And as I say, those friendships are still strong today.
Well, it was very noticeable. You could tell the connectivity and the strength of those bonds, you know. And it's great that actually, you know, what I love about the way you're describing it is that it actually doesn't need words. In a way, you know, and that silent knowing, I think, is what we'll see us through, because it doesn't matter how much people try to say things are changing, this isn't changing, and it was ever thus. And if you go back to, all right, Gentleman Jack, whatever, you know, that's there's a conversation now as a result of that about this has always been there, this isn't anything new. So I was speaking, one of the women I interviewed was in Iran. And there were no words. It's not that they weren't spoken, there were no words, and she found her way nonetheless, you know. And the words that first expressed a closeness between women, funnily enough, was reading Little Women, reading the book Little Women, and the closeness between those sisters it resonated with her somehow. So I do think there is something underneath it all, really. I just wanted to take you back to school. Because interestingly enough, we all thought you were.
There you go then.
So, you know, no one used, think about nobody using words, but, you know, it was whether words were used, that difference marked you out, definitely. And, you know, I'm wondering about whether or not young people in school who are different in whatever way and feisty, because you were always feisty, you know, not happy to stick with the rules because the rules are, you know, rubbish. I remember it was you standing behind me, but me in the front, that when we did the walkout, you know, that was you, that wasn't me.
Yeah, but you were Paula Bolton and you were a bit posh and you got away with things like that. I didn't.
Yeah.
So
put the mouth on the front.
Good thing to do.
Yeah. Go, Paula. Lead the walkout, you know. But it, you know, it's interesting that, because I felt an affinity. You know, there was always something. There was always something with Hazel as well. And what I love is that when we met up 60 years later, you know, at the thing, there were the three of us, and we've all gone our different ways. You know? But if you take it back, and also the teacher who you mentioned, who shall remain nameless,
God rest her soul.
God rest her soul. We all thought she was a lesbian. Absolutely, did we not? In some way, shape, or form. And at her funeral, her life partner was there, a man. Now, was that a cover or was it not? But it's interesting that those dynamics were there at school,
right?
You know, who knows? So tell me about your working life, Liz.
Well, I, as you know, was invited to leave school rather soon, and so of course didn't do what you guys did, get the qualifications and all that kind of stuff. So I went into a bunch of different jobs. I worked in the rag trade. I remember Granny Bussins almost having a heart attack in town when I told her that I sewed things for a living. So, you know, did a bit of that. Debt collecting, did a bit of debt collecting. I mean, I've done quite a lot of things. And I ended up driving a white Arrow van, which was making deliveries for, you know, the case catalogues that we used to get all those years ago. And I did that and I enjoyed it. And I was voted in as the shop steward there. And they all knew that I was a girl. And but the guys didn't treat me any different because they knew that I would stand up for them if they needed to be stood up for. The only conservative shop steward in the universe. And I did that. And of course, good shop stewards always get tapped on the shoulder to be managers. And several times, you know, there's a supervisor's job coming, do you want it? And I'm like, no, look off, I like, you know. And then I turned 30.
Right.
And I thought to myself, you know, there's no prince on a white horse coming to keep me for the rest of my life. I need to build a career. so that I can make enough money to take care of me and anybody else that I may get involved with as time goes on.
Yeah.
So on my terms, I took the management shilling. You know, when I was ready to do it and it suited my purpose, I took the supervisor position.
Yeah.
And that took me to Nottingham. The only job was available was Nottingham, and they paid for my move and all the rest of it. Took me to Nottingham. And it was from there that I ended up in a job with a company called DSL. And when I walked into that building, into that environment, from a work standpoint, I looked at it and thought, where have you been all my life? This is what I want to do. It was a proper distribution, warehousing, logistics company. And I loved every day that I spent there. And so again, I've never made a secret. Because when I looked in the mirror and said, this is who I am, then I'm not hiding that from anybody else.
Yeah.
You know, and you can take it or leave it. It's not going to make any difference. So, you know, I didn't walk into the interview and say, I'm Liz, I'm a lesbian, or I'm Liz and I'm gay. But, you know, people pretty soon suss it. And when they said to you, have you got a girlfriend? Well, no, I haven't, but that doesn't mean that I'm not open to one, you know, that kind of thing. And I worked my way up through that company as high as I could, as I wanted to go. Yeah. With no issues whatsoever. The only things that held me back in my career originally were my feistiness, as you put it, because I was in a very male-orientated environment. And so I had to be better than the men. And unfortunately, the men were intimidated by me. And I would have my line manager sit me down and go, well, you know, Liz, you're a bit on full on. And I'm like, it's not my fault men are intimidated by me. I shouldn't have to suffer for that. Yes. You know, and that was nothing to do with being gay. That was being me. Yes. And so I did have some struggles about that, but never about my sexuality, which was very strange.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's more like the misogyny, the whole thing about women being threatening rather than you as a lesbian. So I mean that's good to hear that you haven't had you know, homophobia or lesbophobia as an impediment at all as you've gone through. It does remind me that one of the other women is an electrician in the States, and she was talking about the tradeswomen there. And they'd spend most of the time working in an all-male environment. And actually, if you can do the banter and do the man, you know, man to man, then it actually, they're not that threatened by the lesbian side of it. You're absolutely right. So interesting, isn't it? So back to Northampton. I want to take you back to Northampton and that social life that you had there. Was that as far as it went? I know you said you'd go to Pride. Were you aware that there was like a gay world out there, whether you accessed it or not? Yeah, I mean, we went clubbing 7 nights a week when we were young. I mean, I've dropped Hazel off at 5:30 and she's got on the Weetabix bus at 6 o'clock. Right. When we've been to a nightclub in Cambridge of all, I mean, we had to go find it. In Northampton, there was the one place, the PR. Yeah. And then we would find out there's a disco in Luton tonight. So in we'd get and down we go. Cambridge, North London was a haunt. Leicester, you know, we had to drive to find places with like-minded people. And there were the PR had like a little room upstairs that was a nightclub / disco, but it wasn't a club, not like Heaven and places like that were, you know. So yeah, we went out and about and we sought out the places to go and the things to do. And of course, the women's football situation, you know, we played league football against teams from Cambridge, from Bedford, from Luton, from London, from Milton Keynes. And at the end of every year, there was a presentation dance, you know, and wow, you go in that room and those were some of our, because none of us were, you know, we weren't dicky bows and waistcoat people. We went out in jeans and t-shirts, but some of the older girls, they were, you know, 3-piece suits and ties up to the, and all that sort of stuff. Proper butch. Again, another word I hate, but the butch element, you know. Yeah. And so when we would go to the football dances, it was kind of interesting.
that there is a big old world out there. And we used to go in search of it. We did go in search of it. We'd get a minibus and we would just hit the town.
So how did you find it? I mean, obviously this is before the internet, this is before
gay news,
phones, gay news. Okay, so the gay press. Well, there
gay
you go.
press. Yeah,
there you go.
That was it. You know, we had gay news, which became the Gay Times, or vice versa. I can't remember. But in the back of that would be all the little, you know, here's a disco here tonight. There's a women's only night there. There's a men only night here. You know, and so we would just get the Gay Times and go to the back page and see where the disco was, and off we'd go.
So in that, was there a difference for you, and did it ever matter whether it was a mixed gay night or a women only night?
No, actually, I didn't mind the mixed. The guys were a pain in the ass sometimes, you pardon the pun, but it made it quite interesting, and a lot of guys are quite friendly and they don't mind the women being there. You'll always get the assholes who think that, you know, women aren't really queer, they're just playing at it. But most guys were good, and most of the places we went weren't women only, because there weren't that many of them. So we had to. I remember going to a place in Leicester one night, and it was a cellar bar, and it was a nightclub, and there was a sign that said pool, and we're like, oh, let's go have a game of pool. And when we got through the back, there was a pool, and there was guys in. So we did a U-turn because we didn't want to be where there was a pool with a load of guys in it.
Yeah.
You know? But no, I can take either. You know, the ladies only nights are always a good giggle and whatever, but it doesn't bother me when there's blokes in the room.
Yeah. And the other thing is, in these football dances and things you went to, so there is some truth to the fact that lesbians are to be found in the football scene, not just one or two.
Lord, no. There was 15 of us.
Yeah.
Probably 2 were not. The captain of the team, Glenda, yeah, she's you take one look at her and think, never in a million years. And her boyfriend came to all the games. He ended up being the manager of the team. And she didn't, I think if it's not in your sphere, Glenda found out we were all at a football tournament in Prestatyn. And on the way home from Prestatyn, Glenda was sitting in the back of one of the girls' cars going, oh, did you see all those lesbians there? Oh, I don't know what I would do if there was, you know. And we all got together and said, yeah, we need to have an intervention with Glenda because clearly she hasn't figured out what's going on here yet. So we took Glenda to one side. And, yeah, no, all those girls she were horrified about in Prestatyn. She's like, yeah. And we're like, hello? No, you're not like them. Because I think some of the girls who play football really are, you know, you take one look at them from 500 paces, and if you didn't know what a lesbian was, you'd know that was.
Right.
And I think that was Glenda's idea. Okay. And she's looking at us and going, not really. But it was funny because she went from, oh, I don't know what I do, to, oh, can I come out with you on Saturday night then? She loved to come out with us because there was no pressure.
Yeah.
She was a great girl. Everybody knew her. Nobody was hitting on her, and there was no guys hanging around her.
Yeah.
And she used to love having her nights out with us.
Yeah.
But yeah, in women's sport generally, but women's football more particularly, it's, as the Americans would say, rife.
Rife. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So why would you know what the Americans say, Liz?
Well, because I spent 20 years living amongst them for my sins.
Okay, so did you go from the DSL logistics blah over to the States? Tell us
I got a transfer with the company that I worked here. Third-party logistics is a big deal in the UK. We do it no manufacturer does his own logistics because he understands I make beans, I don't know how to ship them. Or as I worked for Mars, I make chocolate, I don't know how to ship it. So third-party logistics is big here, but in the States it was not. So Procter & Gamble were trying to distribute their products and they weren't being very good at it. So we were already in Canada and we got a couple of contracts with Procter & Gamble in the US. And then you come to find there aren't any logistics managers. So send to Britain for the cavalry.
Right.
So I got in there on what they call an L1 visa, which is a scarcity of management thing. So I got in there, and yeah, and it was so funny because I went to America in 2001 thinking this country was going to be so far ahead of us in so many things. Okay, and so I left a mobile phone here that was this size and went over there and got a brick. I paid all my bills here with direct debit. I never knew, you know, I just set it up and out it went. I had to write checks and mail them in, you know, and distribution. Oh my God, I walked on water because I knew things that they didn't know. And me and my wife, Sarah, we both are logistics managers. We met a long time ago before we became involved with each other at DSL, and logistics is our thing. And we just loved it because these people thought we were like God. We walked to work down the water here.
Yeah.
And yet we would look at each other and go, fucking idiots, we've been doing this home for years. You know, this is not new. And they were, oh, this is exciting. So, you know, I went into an industry that I was very experienced in, and the people I was going to work for and with had no understanding of. So it didn't do me any harm at all. And in 20 years, well, no, I didn't work logistics for 20 years. I only did it in the US for 8. But in those 8 years, I came across one individual who didn't like me. And I think my sexuality did have a little bit to do with it, but it was more about me saying to them, well, you know, boys, you can do that. You can do that stupid thing you've just suggested, but it'll cost you a fortune and it won't work. And he didn't like it. Yeah.
So again, challenging male authority, but
oh yeah.
So whilst you were in the States, did you carry on with the football there? Was it any different? Was the sports scene there different?
No, by the time I went to the States, I was 42, Paula.
Okay.
You know, I wasn't playing football anymore.
No, but did you do anything else? You might have gone to badminton or something, you know?
No, I didn't, because I went there to work and I didn't really know anybody. I started in Atlanta, and I had one friend that I had, again, going back to my Northampton days. She had played football with us. She became a police officer there, went to advise on the Atlanta Olympics, met somebody and moved. So she was there. So I knew these 2 people in Atlanta and nobody else. So pretty much when I first went out to the States, it was all work. Right. And learning how to live in America and live amongst people who are unbelievably stupid. They've all gone to college, but they're thick as bricks. I mean, that's a terrible, but it is, you know. Everybody there goes to college, goes to university, but I have been asked if it was hard to learn English. So that tells you all you need to know. Yeah. So no, I didn't really get involved in anything of the gay scene. Sarah and I got together, and she was living in New Orleans, and we used to go on a Saturday night to the bars in New Orleans. And a couple of times in Atlanta, we went out again to a gay bar. But, you know, once we got together, we kind of really just did our own thing, the 2 of us. We did the things we like to do. And they were things like, you know, renting a cabin in the mountain or taking a train trip from one end of the country to the other, those kind of things. So I really, once we became involved with each other, we pretty much stayed involved with each other. Yeah. If I tell you that we lived there together for 19 and a half of those, 19 and a half of those 20 years. And we have 2 gay friends that we made, one was a realtor when we bought a house, and Sarah's ex-laws are the only friends we had there. Wow. Well, that's like it's almost you know, 2 completely different parts of your life, really, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you something else then, because obviously you weren't involved in the sports scene there, but it's quite a big issue at the moment in the States, and this whole thing about women's sport and who should be in women's sport. What's your take on that? If we're talking the trans thing, funny enough, was just having this conversation with Sarah yesterday when we were chatting, is that if you've gone male to female and you've gone through puberty prior to transitioning, you should not be in the women's sphere. You shouldn't, because your bone density is different, your muscle structure is different. You know, so that they're taking all your hormones down and all that stuff. That is not what it's about. You're bigger, you're stronger. You know, if you were able to do all that stuff pre-puberty, then maybe the playing field's a little more level. But they've got to find a way, because trans is a fact of life. Yeah. It's one of the things, you know. I'm glad I'm older now, because the woke world really, you can't say this and you can't think that and you can't do the other. But the trans thing is a fact of life, and it has to, you know, we have to find a way for those individuals to do what they do with the many other individuals who are like them. We have to. Yeah. You know, we have to find like-minded people and do what we do. Yeah. And so I think it's not the right thing to have trans women swimming against regular women, cycling against them, and or playing football against them, because it just gives you two. It's funny enough, I don't know if you saw Billie Jean King being interviewed the other night there, and she said that Renee Richards told her that if she had transitioned 10 years earlier than she did, she would have wiped the floor with everybody. But because she was mid to late 30s when it happened, she could just about keep up with the young people. And that I found that fascinating, that you know, Renee Richards, who was one of the very early transition, you know, high profile trans people, said that. She said if she had been 10 years younger, she would have been a multi-champion. Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, age affects everybody. There's a reduction, isn't there? But very clear statement there, very clear explanation, because at the end of the day, it's about a level playing field. Yeah. And it has to be about fairness, but there has to be some logistical solution to this. Maybe you know, you and Sarah are the right brains to get on it, because no one's going anywhere. We're all here, and it's a situation that needs to be dealt with, which to me can only happen through conversation about it. And this silencing of the debate has been one of the things that's held it up. People are quite afraid to talk about it, and it should be, all right, does that mean third spaces then? Do we need third spaces? Do we need a different league? What do we need? Let's get on with the solution. So solution focused thinking about it. I just wondered about your thoughts on representation of lesbians, gay women, whatever your terminology is, in the media as you've been growing up, books, films, music even, because there is this thing of, you know, you can't be what you can't see. Has that changed? Was there anything there that allowed you to see yourself represented anywhere? When we were younger, it was always oh, guess what? There's a gay person singing or whatever. Whereas it tends to be, I think when the new romantics came along, you know, the Boy Georges and the people like that, they started bringing it more to the fore. But prior to that, it really wasn't something that was talked about. You know, people were very clearly, we know now, were gay artists, but they weren't out there telling the world that because of the fear, I guess, for them of not getting contracts, not getting gigs. You know, in America, people couldn't get places to play their music if it was known that they were gay. So they kept it under their hat. But I think maybe into the early to mid 80s, where more of the pop stars and people like that coming to the forefront were out and proud, it kind of rolled it out. But prior to that, you know, and we would pass little DVDs around and pass little books around. Oh, have you seen this film? Have you read this book? There was nothing about, you know, I remember when the first time I ever went to the US and went into a very large bookshop, there was no lesbian and gay section. Yeah. This was 2001. So we're not talking about back in the day. Yeah. But the first time I ever went in Barnes and Noble, which is one of the biggest bookstores in the US, there was no gay and lesbian section. And they carried the Lesbian magazine and the Gay Times magazines, they carried them, but boy, did you have to dig for them at the back of the shelf.
Mm.
They weren't anywhere you could see them. Now, obviously now that's different. You go in Barnes and Noble now, and there's a very, very big gay and lesbian section. So, obviously things are changing, but America's 100 years behind everybody else.
And it's funny because on so much, we think it's the other way around. What happens there first comes across the pond and stuff.
You read some of the articles at the minute where they just rolled Roe versus Wade back, and now they're talking about going after sodomy laws.
Yeah.
Is it really 2022?
Mm.
Do we seriously have people in this world who are looking at that in supposedly the most, the leader of the Western world, America, and they've got people talking about going after sodomy laws, and then gay marriage being repealed? This is where Trump, he put a marker down, and people have just been crawling out from under the stones they've been living under, and Roe versus Wade is the thin end of the wedge. It's just, and I only live there half the year, but Sarah's living there full time, because she thought she could retire and she couldn't, and I can't live in Florida summers. So she's living there and I'm living here, but I think we both agreed that when it comes to it, we're never going to live there full time again. We'll be there in November so we can vote, because we vote.
Right. So you have dual citizenship now.
Yes. Oh, yes. And I've always voted. I remember when, when Trump was up against Hillary, and I got these young girls around me going, oh, I can't vote for him, and I don't like her. I said, well, spoil your fucking ballot then. But get your ass in the voting booth. People died so you could do this. Don't even stand in front of me and say, I'm not an activist, I'm not you, but the vote is it's so important that, it was so difficult for us to get, especially in America. It was so difficult to get, then you use it, and you find a way to go in there and put in your ex.
Make a point.
To just say, oh, I don't like either of them, I'm not going, is just, it really infuriated me. And bless the two of them, these two little girls, they worked for me. They were direct reports of mine when I worked in the health insurance industry. And bless them, I'm going to vote, Liz. I'm like, good for you. You don't have to tell me how you're going to vote, just that you're going to vote.
So you are uniquely situated. I mean, I'm really interested to speak to you about this, Liz, because you've got lived experience in both countries, and like you say, Roe v. Wade's the beginning of a rollback there. It won't be long till it comes here. Where are you on the political parties in Britain? Give us a rundown on what you think is going on politically here.
Well, I have always, and that's no surprise to you, I imagine, been more on the sort of right side of things. And I think that Corbyn really alienated a lot of people, and Keir Starmer's come in behind him, and he doesn't seem credible to me. When I see him on the telly, I just think he's a face. And I debate a lot on Facebook with a young lad that I used to work with 40 years ago in DSL. He's Facebook friends with me, and he hates the Tories, and they're going to get blown out the water, and they're going to this and they're going to that. And I'm like, Ken, people vote for them because there's no credible alternative, and they're afraid of what they don't know. And I don't know how Labour, Lib Dems, whoever it is, creates this credible alternative. Because some of the stuff the Tories have done has been scary over the years. There's no doubt about that. But, this business with the pandemic, they did what they had to do. People got money. They got rights not to be evicted, blah, blah, blah. Not really sure who else would have moved as quickly. When you're in government, you do what you've got to do. The Americans didn't move quickly. There was problems. So I just think that until we have a credible alternative to the Tories, they're going to be there. And I don't know where that credible alternative comes from.
So do you have any thoughts at all about how both parties are dealing with what is a woman issue, which is, you know, a topic that's going around and is in the media quite a lot.
I just think politicians are talking heads. They talk, they don't do. You know, over my whole life, I have looked at it, and you know, when we were kids, teenagers, politics wasn't really in my vision. And over the years, I've come to be, you know, had to be interested in it for various reasons. But when I look back over my life, I just think to myself, they're all in it for themselves. No, they say what they think they need to say now about the issue that might make them look best. But when it comes to actually doing, not much happens. So I tend not to really pay it too much attention.
Yeah, because it's all doing what the going with the wind, what is the popular thing to do. So I just, on the way through, you mentioned that you were the union rep, and a Conservative union rep was a rare thing. So how far up did you get in your union, and how long were you involved in that?
I worked for White Arrow as a driver, as a van driver for 5 years. When I first got there, the guy who was the shop steward was the guy who, when there was a bit of an issue, the boss took him in the office, gave him a cup of tea, and he caved. Okay, he was, you know, banging the drum, but when it actually came to it, caved, and it really irritated me. So I got involved, and they were, you know, he was up for re-election, so I went up against him, and they elected me. And I said, you might be sorry for this, guys, because if you're in the wrong, I'm not going in there to fight your corner. You know, if you've been off sick 4 times in the last 5 days, and he's going to warn you for that, don't even ask me, because I ain't coming. You know. But if something, for instance, we had a policy where you couldn't leave your van running unattended. And if you left your van running unattended and it got stolen, that was on you. And one of the young lads who worked for us was in Milton Keynes, and he pulled up outside a lady's house. She was walking down the path towards him. He stepped out of his van to hand her the parcel, and 2 guys ran round behind him and stole it. Wow. And they wanted to sack him because he left his van running unattended. And I'm like, yeah, that's not happening, boys. Yeah, they're the rules. I don't care if they're the rules. You know, these guys were taking his van, whether he liked it or not. Now, if he hadn't stepped out to hand her the parcel, chances are they'd have hit him on the head. So that it's not happening. And so he's going, look, you and me go talk. You and me can go talk about it all you want, and he's not getting fired. So they obviously felt within their rights to fire him. I'm like, you're not doing it. It's not. And so I'm on the phone to several other depots, places like Nottingham and Liverpool and Glasgow, where they would just walk out for fun. And I went into the office armed with that. I said, I've called Liverpool, I've called Nottingham, I've called Glasgow, and they're with me on this. So you want to sack him, then we're out the door till we can figure out what's what. And he eventually, we settled on him being suspended without pay for 4 weeks. Right, but every payday I got back, and it was in the days when you got a pay packet. Every payday I was back on because it was job and finish. I got back and I sat there outside the pay office, and all the guys would pick the pay packet up and give me a fiver, give me a fiver, give me a fiver. So, and the assistant manager used to give me a tenner. And so for his 4 weeks, he was suspended without pay, which was the best we could do to keep him in a job. But we paid him out of our own wages. You know, but a couple of weeks later, there's a guy in there who's had 16 sick days in a month, and he wants me to stop him getting a written warning, and I'm not going to. So those were my politics. It wasn't really politics for me. It was what's right's right. Yes, I was going to say the strand that is coming through all the time, Liz, is about fairness. Yeah, it's not fair. It wasn't fair right way back at school. You knew what was right and what was wrong. Something needs done about this. Yeah. So we're out the door. And in fact, you've been making people walk out from when you were 14. So. Maybe. Yeah. And, you know, as a shop steward, I used to carry the union agreement in my pocket. And when I became a supervisor, I did the same thing. because the rules applied to all of us.
Yeah.
And so when the shop steward came out for clause B, paragraph 6, then I had clause B, paragraph 6, and we would debate our each interpretation of it.
Yeah.
Because that's how it should be. You do the right thing. It really doesn't matter what your politics are. It doesn't matter what your sexuality is. It doesn't matter anything. What's right is right.
Mm.
That's what it's about.
So what is right about the fact that it was years and years till you were able to marry, and now you can marry? So was that ever something that bothered you? Did you just accept it as part of being gay? You weren't ever going to marry? Because I remember meeting you in one of those clubs back in Northampton. First time I met you after school, actually. I think Sainsbury's came into it. Were you working at Sainsbury's?
My girlfriend was.
Your girlfriend was. And you said, here's the missus. Yeah. I remember you introduced me to the missus. Yeah. Now, and obviously she wasn't your missus. That was just your terms. But now you do have a missus. So
I do.
What was your story about that? Did you always want to? Were you glad when we got gay marriage? Blah blah.
I never really thought about it because it just was never going to happen. But then when it started to be talked about and it started to potentially become a reality, then we talked about it, because Sarah and I have been together we've been married 10 years next year, so we've been together for 12 years before we could do it. And we lived in Florida, which was a very, not anti-gay state, but they had their moments. So we'd had to go to a lawyer and get things like, power of medical attorney, and we had to get things like the ability to access a hospital if either one of us was in there, the claim to be able to claim each other's body in the worst event. We literally had to go and have all that written out because we had no rights. And in some places, and the reason we went and did it was two girls had come down from Boston, and Massachusetts has always been very gay friendly. They had come to Boston on vacation. One of them had 2 children, and they'd been together for many years. And the one who had the children had a massive stroke, and they wouldn't let the woman, her partner, into the ward. And those 2 small children had to go to their mother on their own. And she was, to all intents and purposes, their parent and couldn't go. And so it made us think about those things. And then when it started getting talked about that we could get married, we're like, that would be nice, because we don't have to then go to some lawyer and have, we've got the same as everybody else around us. And so we went to California, where there was no waiting period, because everywhere else you had to get your marriage license and wait. But in California, they would marry you. And the 2 of us got married in a shop front next to a bicycle repair shop. Just the 2 of us. In our favorite place in the world, Los Angeles. So, yeah.
Did you even dress up, Liz?
I did.
There we go. Oh, very smart. There you go.
So I don't do dressing up very often, but having not really thought about it because I didn't think it was ever going to happen, I think Sarah and I, we were friends for many years before we became involved in each other, and we're soulmates.
Yeah.
This is why we're able to make this situation that we're in work, because 6 months of the year we don't live together.
Mm.
But we talk every day, and it works, and we're happy. And so the fact that we were able to marry was a huge deal to us. Mm. So I've gone from, well, it's never going to happen, so why do I care about it, to, wow, here I am, and I'm like everybody else.
Yeah.
I've been able to get married. But again, now Rose gone, they'll go after it.
Yeah.
Now, quite how they'll do it, what they're going to do, divorce us all, kick us all out of our tax brackets and all. I mean, it's not going to be easy, I don't think, but if the Republicans have their way, and again, it's all about the ballot box, because not enough Americans go to the poll.
Yeah.
Obama mobilized them. The 2 times he was voted in, it was the highest turnout ever.
Mm.
But now, since he's been gone, even Trump didn't win by a massive amount, because only like 43% of people turned out. You know, people go to the ballot box, for Christ's sake. So we'll see what the temperature is come November in the midterms. Now Roe's been overturned.
Yeah.
That'll see whether they get people out of their chairs and because they say that 67% of the population believe abortion should be a right.
Mm.
And see, here you could put it on the ballot. We could have a referendum about it.
Mm.
But over there, they don't do shit like that. You know, you don't take stuff to the people. The Constitution doesn't allow it. So you're stuck with it.
Well, I suppose the Constitution is meant to speak for all people equally, isn't it? So
gun owners, it speaks for. Women, not so much.
Yeah. I was just thinking when you were talking about the hospital situation, because I had the same thing in Australia. I was there while my partner at the time, her mum was dying, and I was in the place where you could sleep, and we were taken in turns to sit with her mother in her last hours, and they phoned through from the ward to say it's imminent, come now. And the woman called out the name of my partner. Well, she was at the bed with her mother, but I knew it was, so I got, and she said, well, that's not your name. And I said, no, I'm her partner. And she said, you can't be in here. Not only could I couldn't, according to them in Australia in 1990, I was not allowed as a same-sex partner to be there in the patient's rest area. And it's like moments before your nearest and dearest are dying, and you're facing those things. And so I understand what makes people go for the thing that will give them the legal rights. What I'm fascinated with in your story is that prior to being married, you and Sarah thought it through. Like the body thing, do not resuscitate, all of those. Was there a pro forma for that? Was there, or did you literally think, okay, so if this happens, we need cover for that? And were solicitors able to give you that? On what grounds were you granted?
We went to Tampa Pride,
right?
And there was a guy there who was hawking his wares as an attorney, specifically about gay rights and all that kind of thing. And we took his card and we went to see him, and he walked us through all the things we needed to do.
Okay, so right.
To protect ourselves. Because we obviously were concerned. It was not long after we read that article and we were just like, shit, what if something happens? Because both of us have had breast cancer.
Right.
There's nothing to say that's never going to reoccur. I've had it twice. So, it started to concentrate the mind. And then we saw his card, and he was a great guy. He didn't gouge us or anything like that. He gave us an hour of his time for free. He laid out all the things that he thought we needed to do. And he said, go away and think about it. And if you want to do something, we'll make another appointment. And it cost about $800, I think, to have the whole thing done.
I mean, I imagine that there will have been lots of people who were sorting out all the rights that weren't available to gay people. So I've never heard anybody that's done that. So that's amazing. One other thing I wanted to pick up on from something you mentioned in passing. My nephew, you said when my nephew came out or whatever. So have you got other gay people in your family, and has it changed? Is it spoken about a bit more openly now?
Yeah. Yes. My sister's youngest is gay. And when he was in his mid-teens, he went right off the rails, smoking weed and not going to work and just, right off the rails. Turns out, coming to terms with the fact he was gay.
Yeah.
As soon as he was able to come out and tell us what was what, good as gold. Everything's fine. His dad was a little bit, they were concerned more than anything. But as I said to him, John, it's different now. When I first came out, guys could not give any indication of what was going on because people would just jump them for fun and kick the shit out of them. The world's a different place now. It is easier for it was easier for us than it was for those before us. And it's easier for them than it was for us, I believe. They're able to, they go out, they have a big circle of friends. Many of their friends are not gay, but they're included in the I think younger people don't look twice at you. In our day, it was difficult to integrate with people who were not gay. Whereas nowadays, they have circles of friends who are,
also.
So yeah, it's very different. It's very different.
Yeah, well, that's good as like a measure of how things are. I just wondered the Liz common sense thing, right? So you've lived in the States, and things are different there with regards to gender identity and all of these. It was. Can you remember the Northampton Lesbian and Gay Alliance? There was a building in Northampton.
Yes.
Yeah, and then it was LGB. And we, both of us, will have accessed that provision.
Yeah.
And now there's like 9 million other letters added.
Yeah.
Any sense of how that's happening, why it's happening, and how, who's in charge of it? Because nobody's ever written and said, would you like to have this added to your gang?
Yeah, Q's and T's and pluses and that. I don't why is this all attached to, I guess because the theory was that we weren't normal, because that was a theory, you're not normal. And so anything that's not normal just gets tacked onto the end of us.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Because I don't necessarily identify with these people. And I worry a little bit that there's some bandwagon jumping going on. But I'm 65 years old, Paul, and I've never really been, you're all about sitting outside of bases and doing all your bit, and I've always admired you for that, and I never really have. So I kind of, if I'm asked for my opinion, I give it, but I've never really been someone for going and getting involved in it. The most I've ever done is my Gay Pride March. We once did a pro-abortion rally that happened to come across an anti-abortion rally on the same day in the same neck of the woods, which was kind of interesting, but I tend not to. I guess I'm my mother's daughter. I'm a lazy git.
Liz, you are anything but lazy. Listen to your story. You've not stopped the whole time. And in fact, picking you up on that, I just wanted to end on something else that hasn't come up, right, is lesbians and the outdoors. Okay. Yeah. I know that like me, like Hazel, that outdoors, hiking, all of that stuff, it's a real thing for you and for Sarah. And I love watching your the places you travel to. So how important has that been to you? What is your connection? Is it about travel difference? Is it about nature? What is it? And how does that work as a glue to your relationship?
I think it got worse in America because it's so vast and it has so much to offer.
It got worse.
Well, I always here. Well, when I lived here, and I was with the girls in Northampton, we'd have a day to Dovedale, and we'd go down to Durdledore, and we'd get a minibus and do all that stuff. But I've camped out once in my life, and I'm never doing it again. And that was on an outward bound course, I might add.
Right.
But Sarah's mother was a huge one for being out and walking in the outdoors, and so Sarah loves to do that. And to be fair, I was let's have a walk at Dovedale, let's have a walk here, whatever. But Sarah's she's gonna hike, she's gonna have a good old day out. And so when we first started doing it, I was like, oh, this is a chore. But as I got more into it and understood where she's coming from, it's something we love to do. And when you're in America and you've got things like Yosemite and the Great Smoky Mountains and northern Georgia, the Appalachian Trail, and when all that is in essence either within driving distance or a 4-hour flight from where you are, you're going to do that. And when we went to Yosemite, we just had the memory, it's just come up, it was 4 years ago, and I climbed up an 8,000 feet peak. It was a walk, it wasn't climbing, but it was hard work. And when we got to the top, I was laughing at myself because I'm thinking, I would never have done this if it wasn't for her. I like to be out and I like to walk and but Sarah's made me more about it and I love it to bits. And like I said, part of our plan is when Sarah stops working is that we're going to do all the things we said we were going to do, drive Route 66 and go to all the national parks and all that. And some of that we'll have to do in the summer, you know, because you can't go to Yellowstone in December because it's shut. So it just, America makes that kind of stuff so much easier to do because it's vast. And it's, you know, like we're in the Smokies and a bear and her 3 cubs come running out of the grass 20 feet from where we're standing. You know, that was just a moment, you know. So we've learned to love it together. And Griffith Park in Los Angeles is Sarah's favorite place in the world. And I have to say, I do love Griffith Park too, because it's right in the middle of one of the biggest metropolises in the world. And yet there it is, this fantastic walking trails and, you know, waterfalls and all that kind of stuff. And of course, when Sarah dies, her ashes have to be scattered at the top of Griffith Park.
Right.
So I'll have to get one of my nephews involved, because last summer when we went, March, we were there in March, and we're climbing up, and one of my knees is really, really gone. And we got about 3/4 of the way, and I'm like, sorry, babe, I got to sit here in this little garden and let you get on with it. So I sat under a tree, looking out over Los Angeles, over the skyline, and off she went to the top on her own, and then came back. You messaged me when she got there and then came back down. So one of my nephews is going to have to do the last bit when the time comes, right, assuming I'm not gone first.
Well, yeah, or she might come up with a slightly more accessible place. You never know, Liz. But yeah, I mean, it's great to hear how far you've gone. You know, and yeah, it's for me. I love the comparison, because it's you know, we started in the same place at the same time, neck and neck, and we have gone on these completely different circuitous routes, and you know, and here we are. What would you say to a young lass that is you? So imagine Liz at 14 nowadays. Ooh. What advice would you give to her? How would you tell her to find her tribe?
Well, sport was my path, but if she wasn't a particularly sporty individual, I might send her to a bookstore, because now there is a lot of literature, there is a lot of you know, media out there that you could educate yourself about your situation, and very, very likely run into some like-minded people.
There you go. So sports or books. Brilliant. Yeah. Anyway, it's been fantastic to speak to you, and I'm really glad that my 21st proud lesbian was in fact the first lesbian I ever knew, who I knew before she knew. And
right,
just to say, when I came out to Mandy. Remember Mandy? Mandy Gutteridge, as was.
Yes.
And I said, I've got something to tell you, Mandy. She said, do I need to sit down? And I said, well, you might do. So anyway, I said, well, you know, I finally realised I'm a lesbian. She said, oh, is that all? My mum told me that when you were 12. And just like you, I said, I wish she'd bloody well told me.
Yeah, right. I wish someone had told me too. Life might have been
there you go. Anyway.
Yeah. So maybe not so boring after all.
No, very fascinating that was. Thank you very much to Liz, my last proud lesbian of the series for now. Bye.
And between now and November 1st, if you're out this way, give me a shout.
Yes, well, I was going to say, to really finish off, let's go and do a walk, all right? There's only a certain amount of distance between us. We'll do that.